Hey everyone, this is a compilation of the season reviews. For all the credits and original videos, check the description, I've linked the playlist. I'm also going to be adding some red text with some thoughts from future me on it, I guess. I don't know how many of them there'll be, we'll see, but yep, I hope you enjoy the compilation. Splatoon 1 and 2 ended up introducing weapon kits about weekly or so, as well as having larger updates at more or less random dates, like version 2.0, etc. In Splatoon 3, this shifted to seasons, where every 3 months we'll get a large update containing kits, new weapons, maps, catalog, and so on. And today I want to talk about if I like this system or not. So I'm just going to get right into it, and you can subscribe if you want to see more Splatoon content from me. Let's start off with the weapon kits. I have 2 things that I like and 2 things that I don't like. So let's start with the positives. I like that the new kits look more distinct visually from each other. Something like the Luna Neo is the best example, where it went from just a sticker to an absolute color swap that made it stand out a lot more. This means they don't just look better, but they also convey more quickly to the player which kits they are, which I think is important for gameplay. On top of that, I overall like the kit design. The only one I dislike outright is Dapple Dualies, because I feel like the idea of having a kit so similar to Tetra, especially when it's just the 6th kit in the Dualie class, is absolutely inexcusable. Outside of that though, while not all the kits are strong balance-wise, they have a unique identity, still feel strong, and feel like they have a sense of what they're trying to be good at, which is very important and something a lot of Splatoon 2 kits lack. My first major problem though is that we only got 10 kits. We know there are 8 seasonal updates, and if we get 80 kits in total, with 55 base weapons right now counting the new ones, we're barely gonna have any third kits at all. And we know we're probably gonna get way more new weapons than just these 3 if they keep up this cycle. Splatoon 1 and 2 both failed to reach third kits for all, and it feels odd that they didn't because they don't take up too much development time and add so many new playstyles to the game. This is coming from someone who didn't really enjoy or use that much of Rapids until Kenta Rapid came out, and then boom, 7 million Perfect! This was especially apparent in Splatoon 2, where Torpedo, Fizzy Bomb, Ultra Stamp, and Booyah Bomb were all only stuck on 5 weapons each at the end of the game's lifestyle, to the point where many people didn't even try them out. I'm hoping we bump up to around 15 to 20 kits in future updates, or at the very least the later updates will start to add more, because there's really no reason not to hit third kits on every single weapon, especially for Splatoon 3. My second problem is that most of these kits were in the shooter category, despite shooters already having the most main weapons in the entire game. This has led to a class that already has so many options compared to the others, just having even more so. How are Splatanas and Stringers, the new weapon classes added to the game, still left at only 2 kits each? Future updates need to spread out the weapon kits to be involved in more of the classes, and a lot of the classes that were left out from this update should be getting 2 kits in the next one. As for the 3 brand new weapons, I like the choices for them. Going back to the original 3 classes makes sense, as none of these have gotten a new kit for several years now. On top of that, I think the concepts, looks, and execution of these weapons are great. They have unique identities and things that they are good at, and for the most part, I think they're all fun. I do think, however, the power of these weapons is a little bit low, and the kits outside of the Novas are a bit weak. And I know this isn't a hyper-competitive thing, but I've seen a lot of people not really find these weapons good, even on a casual side, which I think is a bit problematic. Obviously, it's better than releasing a weapon that's really overtuned, but I do hope with the next set of weapons the devs give them just a little bit more power on launch. As a whole, though, I don't really have many complaints with the new weapons. I like them, and I can't wait to see what they do with them in future with new kits and balance changes. Rank X also returns from Splatoon 2, well, sort of. Rather than being the next rank from S+, it's basically its own mode with its own rotation and rules. You do have to be S+ in order to get in this mode, but now it functions a bit differently. Outside of the aforementioned rotation, you can also now pick your region. This is mainly helpful for really high-ranked players in Splatoon 2, around 2600 or higher, because NA lobbies in that game would really not get much higher than 2300, and the average was around 2100, which would be much lower than your normal power. Japan, with a much wider player base, especially at higher levels, has much better lobbies, and so being able to be in those regions is really useful for those players, and for those who don't care as much about higher power lobbies, they get to pick NA. The matchmaking seems to be slightly improved, and you also are in series now, where it's a 3 wins or 3 losses before you get your points, and if you win your series, you are guaranteed a minimum of 10 points. This is great because whereas in Splatoon 2, you could get 0.1 points for a game won, and someone had this happen to him 3 times in a row. I think plus 10 is a good minimum reward for a series that ensures getting that set win feels good, and in general, I think have it be ranked based off a series of games instead of one match with how volatile Splatoon can be is a lot more fair. That being said, jank with the point system is not gone, and there have been some 2-3 series that have lost absurd amounts of points, so there's definitely some fine tweaking to be done. Finally, while not officially announced, the game seems to prioritize how weapons are labeled in each team comp differently. Here's a chart of weapons that will be mirrored from your team to the other team, which I think is really interesting, and for the most part, I like this. This means that the weapon compositions are much less likely to give you a disadvantage, and I have not had a single lobby with one team having more chargers than the other team, which in particular has felt great. Rank X got a lot more improvements than I thought, and while I think the matchmaking could still be made a little bit better, as a whole, they did a lot to improve the system, and having another rotation of maps to pick from is always a positive. I already did a video on the new maps, so for more specifics I'll talk about it there, but is 2 maps, 1 returning and 1 new map, good enough? I would say yes. This would end up having much more maps than Splatoon 2, and we would get a good bit of new stages since only 1 map would be returning if they decided to keep up with this pattern, which would likely shift between returning maps from Splatoon 1 and Splatoon 2, which I think is fair. I am still hoping that the stage design improves in Splatoon 3, but if this update was anything to indicate, they are willing to be more flexible than the launch maps in terms of many design decisions such as having valuable flanks, which I think is a good sign. The new photo mode in Recon was awesome, both being able to do it with amiibos and most importantly being able to do it with your team. Finally being able to take actual pictures with each other that weren't just someone pressing the screenshot button has been so nice, and I've really enjoyed it. It's a small feature, but if more updates come with small features like this, I think it'll add up a lot over time, and I think stuff like the photo mode are actually quite important to put in these updates to just give a few more things for players to do. As for the catalog, I've been filling it out and it seems fine. Looking at all the emotes, they all seem pretty cool, and my only real major complaint about this is that there's no new emote that uses the weapons in them. I think an easy idea to make this happen fast would be reusing the animations from Splatoon 1 and 2, which has a bunch to go from, especially since Splatoon 2 has unique animations if you're Octolings. A lot of these poses, like the heavy spalling from Splatoon 1, were just fan favorites. It allows you to use assets that you've had before, and you could imagine what if bows were in Splatoon 1? What would their animation look like in that game? Adding all of these would be a total of 3 brand new victory animations for every single weapon, and I think it would be a welcome change. Salmon Run also got a lot of content in this update. First of all, we got a returning stage with Marooner's Bay, which, I think the stage benefits a lot from Splatoon 3's new mechanics and overall improved Salmon Run, and in particular, the egg throw is amazing for this map, but if they were going to release this map basically unchanged from Splatoon 2, why not just put it in the base game? Again, it's a nice addition, I just question why it's put in now, or why there wasn't more done to it. It feels a bit odd to me. The new Grizzco weapon of the Splatana Stamper, while I am terrible at it, is honestly one of my favorites. I think the ability to shred bosses like that is awesome, and the vulnerability you get put into to be able to do that is amazing. And I have to say, just the charge/dash is so cool. I feel like this is a well-designed Grizzco weapon that feels powerful while still having clear flaws, which is what stuff like the Grizzco machine tend to do right. Also, I'm aware it's a Grizzco Splatana and Grizzco Slosher. The looks of these weapons just make me think of the kits, I'm sorry. The first big run happened as well, and it was definitely an event that exists. There was a lot of stuff I liked. I think Wahoo World's actually a pretty good salmon map, and it's nice to kick it out of normal rotations. The plaza being taken over and the music involved is really awesome and really fits the theme, and I like that Mr. Grizz still just only gives a crap about profits, because that's totally what he would do. I don't want to spend too much time on the drama over the statue reward. As someone who didn't get the gold, I don't care. It's just cosmetic. It's not a big part of the event. It's not something that limits people from enjoying it, and good salmon players deserve more recognition. I am not one of them. Those people deserve it. Go watch Brian. I think the best way I can say this is that my disappointment isn't really about anything that they did. It's more about that they didn't really do much. For a disabled Salmonid Invasion, there surely wasn't a lot going on compared to normal Salmon Run. There wasn't really any new night waves, and in fact, many of them didn't actually happen, probably because they wouldn't fit in the stage. It's a random weapons rotation, but there's only one Grizzco weapon. Why would this not be a full Grizzco weapon rotation, especially with the urgency? That would be a cool way to distinguish it. No new Salmonids, no new waves, no new boss Salmonid, nothing. I'm not saying we needed all this stuff, but like, I would have liked a little bit of something new. I don't know, it's the first one, it'll probably get better from here. It's a good way to make an in-universe excuse to rework stages, which could always be nice in the future, but as of right now, it's just kinda, well, okay, that was something. I kind of enjoyed it, but I just wish there was a little bit more. To wrap up a bunch of small things speedrun, the song at the bottom is cool, and it's nice for those who want to know what the song is called, especially since some of them apparently didn't have actual names until now, at least in the public. The new gear is fine. There's some returning gear I like, and in general, it's cool, but it's just cosmetic. There's not too much I really have to critique here. Being able to see the dots at the bottom of the screen when you're picking through the weapons you're selecting is cool. I like that. And that's everything we got. So let's talk about some things that we didn't get. You still can't change weapons when queuing with a team in open. Why? You still cannot see the progress bar on gear for abilities to level up. Why? These two combined mean that leveling up in open is unusually slow because gotta change gear again, and that takes forever because you can't do that without remaking it. There are still no room codes. This is one of the easiest things to implement. Please give me a way to do viewer battles with people because I am not using this stupid friend system. The biggest thing that was missing from this update is online table turf, and I cannot understand why this was delayed. I get not knowing how well table turf was gonna do and letting people build their decks before letting you play against each other for the launch of the game, but we are 3 months in. People who are interested in table turf are playing table turf. Why can they not play against their friends? I know this update is planned to happen eventually, but it just isn't here yet, and I don't know why. Honestly, I really like the seasonal schedule for Splatoon. I think it's cool and gives a bit of identity to each period of the game's lifespan, which is awesome. I think for the most part, they added content really well, and I like the majority of the things they put in the game and had very small complaints. My biggest issue is that I think it's not quite enough size-wise. A few more weapon kits, online table turf, and a few other features would have made this update stand out just a lot more, and in general, I think the updates need to have a bit more content than what we got this time. This was the first update though, so we could potentially see more in the future, and especially with the DLC coming out, I wouldn't be surprised if one of these updates is scheduled to be way larger than the others. So we'll have to see. But that's my thoughts on the update cycle. Let me know what you guys think and if you're satisfied with this, and I'll see you all in a future video. Well, everybody, we've got our fair share of time with the fresh season, so today I want to review it like I did the last one. I'm going to be covering everything they added and talking about if this is really the step up the update cycle has needed or if we still need a bit more. If you like this kind of analytical content, be sure to subscribe and let's get into it. First up, new kits. We got 2 positives. First off, we got more kits than last time. It's only by 1 technically, but hey, it is more than 10. I guess we'll take it. The more important piece of good news is I think the kit design was overall better. Most of the weaker kits, again, are a result of the special balance being low, and there were way more stronger options and overall stronger power of the weapon kits than there was last time, which I do think is nice. There is, of course, an obvious glaring downside. 6 of the 11 kits are shooters, and this one's really bad. Splatonas and Stringers have not gotten a new kit or new weapon for 6 months, and this game is going to go 9 months before we get a new Brella, Stringer, or Splatana. I don't have a problem with shooters being the majority of kits being added, I really don't, but when so many other weapon classes are left to the wayside, it's a little bit disappointing to say the least. Neo Splash's kit also felt super redundant. It's so incredibly similar to T-Tech in a game with 14 subs and 17 specials. If we're going to be adding a lot of shooters, they better at least play differently from each other rather than being almost the exact same playstyle and feel. Eventually, I would like to do an entire video talking about these specials, but for now, in the context of them being added in this update, I think they did a really good job. Both of these specials feel really strong, especially Kraken, and maintain a unique feel that's distinct from other specials. There is a lot more unique plays you can make with Chump in terms of tanking damage and hiding your own teammate's super jumps. And Kraken, despite being weaker than in Splatoon 1, feels more fun and maintains the same feel of the special as they did in that game, which was a really tough task. Design-wise, I think Super Chump might be one of my favorite specials they have ever added. There are so many unique options and ways to interact for both sides that make it super cool to me. Kraken, on the other hand, while it does feel great to use, maintains some of the problems it has from Splatoon 1, mainly in terms of how invincibility interacts with players and the objective. We are seeing a lot of Krakens to cheese tower control, to cheese Rainmaker pops, and to give super jumps with the power clamp, which in contrast to Splatoon 2's baller jumps, which had limited HP, a slow speed, and less duration, is much more unfair to deal with. I'll go more in depth about this problem in another video, but for now I think it's a small thing that'll only affect a fraction of the player base for now, so it's not something I want to worry about, and in terms of the update, it's better the specials feel powerful. The maps I also talked about in depth in another video, so I'm not going to say too much here, but it's technically a step up from the previous one in terms of the new map, Umami Ruins, compared to Brinewater Springs. The map has more routes, plays a bit more uniquely, and is a little bit more open. Even if it has its problems, I think that this is a better stage that should feel especially more enjoyable at casual levels. Manta got made overall better with most changes, but again, the removal of a route ended up making it feel much worse on tower control and Rainmaker than it did in Splatoon 2, which is a little bit unfortunate. Outside of that, I don't really have too much to add onto the stages, just see my full video on it if you want more in-depth thoughts. One thing from the chill season that I didn't talk about in terms of the context of this update, but I think is more important to this time, is the balance patch. Since crab meta, and crab being as good as it is, has gotten so incredibly stale, as well as special balance in general being a massive problem, with the best specials like Tentamissiles and Crab Tank feeling so astronomically better than specials like Ultra Stamp, Reef Slider, and Inkjet, that it starts to affect play outside of just competitive. This patch is once again the third attempt at trying to indirectly nerf crab by buffing other options as its primary goal, and it has not worked again for the third time. I can understand the devs wanting to stick with this balanced design philosophy, but we are not even doing the bare minimum when it starts to not work. Splash being 200p still instead of 210 after 3 patches is just absolutely ridiculous, especially when the main issue is a weapon being stacked 2 to 3 times. That nerf especially helps. The hesitancy to even remotely tone back any part of this weapon's kit is absolutely ridiculous and inexcusable, and the meta's inability to change is becoming a massive problem. I'm aware that this is mostly a competitive issue, but I have to talk about it as I'm someone who cares about the competitive scene, and the fact that tournaments are getting more and more stale to watch because of it is frankly sad. For casual play, you guys didn't get much either though. None of the balance patches were really that interesting in terms of expanding options you could do, as most of the buffs, rather than fixing a special's problems, fix them specifically versus crab. So if you're playing in the upper ranks, but not high enough on the X-Power leaderboards to be fighting multiple crabs, congratulations. Specials like Ultra Stamp and Inkjet are going to feel just as terrible as they did before, if not worse, considering stuff like Kraken was added to the game. On top of this, the stage reworks we got were a little bit laughable. Some of the things like the Wahoo pole just look so unbelievably funny while being completely useless. Nerfing things like brushes, rollers, or explosion specials more than the chargers or crab they're actually meant to tone back. There were no new flanks added, some routes such as Reef's back and forth route was taken away, with not even a defending sponge to move backward on. Yes, as a whole the map changes were still arguably positive at addressing the problem, but it went about it in completely the wrong way, and it's so minimally a positive that it might as well not even be there at all in some situations. This balance patch is an absolute catastrophic failure, and there's no other way to put it. The special balance is still just as much as an issue as there was before, and now even if we fix crab, the buffs we did to the weaker specials will become irrelevant. Anyway, let's move on to talking about the catalog. Like with last time, it was overall very solid, and there's only been one major point of contention, being the Reppin' Inkopolis emote. This is the Splatoon 1 victory animations being brought back, which is cool, and actually something I requested last time. The downsides are two things. First off, brushes and blasters have the same animations as shooters and rollers. This is understandable, as those were considered the same class in Splatoon 1, and blaster players might prefer to have that animation from Splatoon 1. The main disappointing part is that if you are playing a Dually, Brella, Splatana, or Stringer, weapons not in Splatoon 1, you do not get anything. anything. You are actually just using the default weapon animation of Splatoon 3. It's not even tweaked a little bit. I get these weapons weren't in Splatoon 1, but they still could have easily had their own animations to match the style of that game, and I think just reusing the Splatoon 3 ones is one of the most lazy solutions they could have done. Of course, this is just an emote and not a major deal, but if we get all of Splatoon 2's back, which is a unique animation for boy and girl of Inkling and Octoling, that will be 5 emotes that the 2 Splatoon 3 weapons will have no access to and instead get the default one. At that point, it is going to look hilariously bad, so I hope they update the emotes to include new animations for the weapons not in that game. Finally, before we talk about other modes, I will mention the Inkopolis DLC. This is technically part of the paid DLC, but it honestly feels like a purchase bonus compared to the single player mode we're going to get later, and it released at the exact same time. This area is really cool. I like the improved graphics, all the shopkeepers, and a lot of the lore was updated for the characters for the plaza to remain alive, which is really cool, and especially hearing the music from that game really fits the vibe. If this was free content we got for absolutely nothing, I would be really happy about it and think it's amazing as an option. But for about $5 worth, if the DLC is 20 similar to Octo expansion, yeah, I don't know. I can understand not wanting to have anything exclusive to Splatoon 1 there, but really, could we not have gotten something small like the arcade games coming back, which would have been incredibly easy to do considering they already exist and wouldn't interfere with players who didn't bought the DLC that much? Let alone other opportunities like having Callie and Marie potentially host the news or having the Splatoon 1 training room be present as an option you can select. There was just a bit more they could have done and unfortunately didn't do. If you're going to get the side order DLC, which if it's anything like Octo expansion will be absolutely worth the purchase, then yeah, this is a cool addition. But for those who don't want to fork over extra money on the game, I can't say the Inkopolis DLC is something exactly worth it. It is nice though, I guess. Salmon Run got a few things in this update. First off, we got our next big run and the new Ouroboros King Salmonid. Last time I mentioned that big run felt a bit disappointing because they didn't really do too much, but having it be the debut of a new King Salmonid honestly makes the event way more interesting. Like with last time, I wish they did a little bit more, but having it be the debut of a new King Salmonid, as well as being a new Salmon Run stage, as obviously we didn't play on Inkblot before, makes the mode totally fine to me, and I had a lot more fun this time around. I also really like the Ouroboros. It is a little bit easier than Chozuna, but honestly, it feels way cooler to fight. The idea of being able to blow up the Booyah Bomb in its mouth is really cool. It's risky, and it's especially difficult because you have to follow where the mouth is compared to the giant body, but it's a really cool mechanic. The boss also just looks fantastic, and honestly, it's probably my favorite one of the two, so I think they did a great job there. There is also a new mode coming out soon called Extra Work, which is basically like a tournament mode with 5 waves and more consistent things. This first one starts later though, so we don't have any access to it. I think it's cool that Salmon Run is getting new modes though, so it's a positive for me right now. Online Table Turf is finally here. I've only played a few matches of it, but it's honestly been really nice. There are a few Table Turf tournaments even happening from some normal tournament organizers like Dapple Productions, which is really cool. There's not too much to say here. I like the time controls that are available in private battles, and being able to sit at a table with people just looks really cool. And it's nice to see that area in the training room finally getting some use. This is kind of the last major thing Table Turf has been waiting for, and it's cool to see it happening. I will definitely be watching some competitive Table Turf tournaments, and I'd recommend you guys do so as well. Besides that, it's time for the 3 small things speed run. First up, we got room codes finally, in the form of pools. They are a little bit complicated, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty simple, and it's nice to finally be able to host rooms without adding people, so I can do things like viewer PBs. We got a jukebox, so you can choose the music in the lobby, and it even includes stuff like the single player music or some stuff from Splatoon 1, which is sick. I'm really happy to see it. And finally, the shops now have 9 pieces of gear per shop instead of 6, which is just a net positive. So, with everything being said, what do I think of this season? Well, honestly, it's definitely a step up from Chill Season, and I think one of the things that's contributed to this the most is the main new thing, the specials, are actually pretty prominent compared to the 3 new weapons, which are still kind of lackluster. Having the main new thing you add to your season actually be something that people see is pretty important, and I think it's a big part of the reason that Chill Season felt really underwhelming after the update dropped. That being said, even if the balance patch was insane, which is the biggest problem of this season, I don't think I could call it a good one. The content here is still honestly a little underwhelming for 3-month periods, and especially things like the weapon kits are still way too low quantity. Personally, I think that the Splatoon devs should be doing mid-season partial updates, and stuff like adding a few extra weapon kits or returning features such as the Squid Beats 2 from Splatoon 2 or the arcade minigames from Splatoon 1 should still be simple enough to be feasible. I'm definitely more happy with this update than the previous one, but I'm hoping as these updates get better with time, they will continue to improve, and the next one we get will have even more content than this one. Well, let me know what you guys think. Does this have enough content for you, and are you happy with what we got? Hello everyone, the Sizzle season's been out for a bit, and wow, I have had a lot of mixed opinions on it leading up to this point. So today I want to give my final thoughts on everything and rate if this really was a good season or not. I think these are the best designed kits of the entire update cycle. Not that they have the best ones overall, but they feel the most fun and well thought out. There's definitely some duds, don't get me wrong. Sprinkler repeating on Tetcher is really dumb, on S-Blast it's not great, and there's a few other things synergy-wise that aren't amazing, and none of the kits as a whole are insanely strong, but none of them are insanely weak either, and honestly, I've had a lot of time just going and trying all of them out compared to the previous seasons. It's a great reminder of just how amazing just adding a few more kits are for the game. Which ties into my criticism here. We only have 9 of them, which is the lowest, and it's crazy. I already talked about this in a different video on the topic as a whole, but there is so many weapons in this game, 25 in total, 27 counting the new weapons, that do not have a second kit. And these weapons aren't going to get one until a year into the game's lifespan. This not only just sucks for right now, but this is a game that really should have third kits for every weapon. Splatoon 1 and 2 did not do this. And this game, compared to those, has way more mains, subs, and specials. There are so many more interesting combinations, and we see so few of them that it really sucks. At this point, I'm unsure if it's going to get any better, but I hope by some miracle the amount of kits we get in updates or the amount of time we get updates is somehow increased to allow it to happen. But for the time being, it's easily still the biggest disappointment of these updates. I also talked about the brand new weapons already. As a whole, I think they are fun, and they're well balanced all around. Obviously, competitive-wise is where things get a bit more picky as to how good they are, but casual-wise, ranked, etc., I think they are in a great spot. Like the chill season weapons, they have a very clear sense of identity, except unlike those, they are balanced significantly better. I don't think they feel weak or undertuned at all, or are going to suffer from the low usage rate that those 3 weapons did. The maps are okay. I think Barnacle and Dime is the best Splatoon 3 original stage we have gotten so far. I really do think it tops everything else. It's not perfect everywhere, and Tower and Rain it's still pretty meh. But honestly, Zones and Clams on that map dumpsters pretty much everything else outside of Undertow Rainmaker in terms of Splatoon 3 original maps, so I think it pretty much is better than most of the competition. That being said, it's hardly a compliment when this is a similar layout that we've gone for the past 3 updates. The fact that it took them this long to do one this decently already is pretty disappointing. At least it does feel pretty fun, and the middle of the map has a good dynamic that kind of feels a lot like Mako Mart, which is a big favorite among a lot of people in this game, so I'll take it. Humpback is strange because I feel like in Clam Blitz and Rainmaker, the stage has some amazing improvements. The checkpoint areas are great for it, the defending sponges to get back on both of them are nice, the uninkable block stuff that is there on Clam Blitz, but then Tower and Zones are just like the same thing. Like, seriously, why did we put a sponge to be able to go back and then just only put it on those 2 modes? Like, what actual reason is there for the sponge to not be there on Zones and Tower Control? I mean, with how awful the stages are in this game, just having a few better combinations is already so huge, especially if you play in private battles and get to actually pick the ones you want. Like, I want to be positive about the stuff they're getting right, but honestly, it's so minuscule, and I feel like I'm praising mediocre stage design just because the rest of it is bad. And it's hard to really try and praise these things without feeling like I'm being unfair and just lowering my standards over getting used to these maps, and that really sucks. Speaking of things I think I had too low standards for, the balance patch. When this came out, I thought this was good, but not as good as the previous one, and honestly now I think it's just whatever. Yeah, Machine got nerfed, maybe a little bit overdone, but probably necessary, that's fine. The Stamper nerfs worked out overall, some of the buffs they did were fine, but like, Splash is still 200p, and Ballpoint is only 200p. That's not a real nerf. That's a revert of an unnecessary buff you did 2 patches ago. That's not even the most disappointing thing of the patch. By now I'm used to seeing double splash at this point, but where are the buffs? How do you have specials in the spot they're in, like Reef Slider or Ink Vacuum, and not do anything to them? How do you have main weapons in the game like Snipe Rider and are so afraid to buff them? And this hurts especially more because in Salmon Run, some of these weapons got insane buffs. Snipe Rider legit went from a weapon that was completely unfun to use to something that actually had a real niche in Salmon Run. And I get it's easier there when you're fighting against AIs and not people, but they are so hesitant to buff anything in this game. There are so many underpowered main weapons, sub-weapons, and special weapons, and we're not even trying at this point. Why? That's so early into the game's life. I've thought a lot about it, and yeah, I'm still really happy we're not over-nerfing stuff. God's sakes, if we're gonna go with that approach, we better be buffing the stuff that really needs it, and most of the stuff has needed it for years, so it's just sad at this point. 3.1 really tried with a lot of its buffs. Even that one didn't do as much as I would like to see, but it felt like it put in a real effort, while this update felt like, we might as well try and give a few things tiny buffs that barely even matter. It's really disappointing. Anyway, this turned out a bit more negative than intended, so let's talk about something positive. The new Salmon Run stage is great. I don't know what it is, but they really know how to make new Salmon Run maps in this game. This is the third one we've gotten, and all three of them have continued to feel amazing. I'm still getting used to it for a bit, but the layout is unique. I really like the way the Snatchers work on that map, and in general, it feels very fun and enjoyable on in every single wave it has. Really good stuff. Big Run also happened, and while I'm disappointed there's no new King Salmonid or Grizzco weapon, the rest of it I think was fine. Yeah, Undertale Low Tide was kind of meh, but that's more of a problem that the stage has a bunch of random uninkable walls, which is not really Big Run's fault. I think having either King Salmonid have the chance to show up, double scales, and of course we already have the extra bonuses that have always been present in Big Run, is really cool, and served to keep the event interesting even if we weren't getting something completely new in terms of weapons or King Salmonid. So honestly, I had a lot of fun with it, and got my highest score of 172. Okay, let's keep the positivity going. We can talk about... Oh no, it's event mode. Guys, I have to be honest. Again, I don't like to keep this negative tone too much, but this mode was such a fumble. We have 4 challenges scheduled right now. One of them is just the new stages on Turf War with abilities off, 2 of which are actually interesting, being the too many Trizukas, different from Infinite, so I think it's fine, and random weapons, which I think is going to be really interesting to see how that'll play out, and I'm very excited for it. And then the 4th one is nothing. You're just trying to get a high power. Look, I get it. Yeah, this was an event thing we did in Splatoon 2, where there'd be a league rotation where you try to get the highest power, but the reason it doesn't fit here is because event mode barely happens. There's like 4 or 5 of these in an entire month, and each of these events only happen for 6 hours in total. So when one of these events is basically nothing, it turns from, oh, okay, this is just something we had in Splatoon 2 to, oh, this is taking 1 of 5 event slots that are incredibly hard to play in a single month. If we're going to keep event mode as restricted and limited in terms of how you can play it and its themes, stuff like the first one we got and that one need to be moved into just Anarchy open events. Realistically though, all of these problems are because 1, we tried to split league mode into 2 modes, and 2, we have unnecessary time restrictions. And I've seen complaints about it everywhere, from competitive and casual side of things. It just sucks because the concept for this mode is awesome. Too Many Trizukas was really fun, and there's even more events that I'm sure are going to be incredibly interesting to play, but they're so goddamn rare. When we already have extra work, big runs, Splatfests, and potential other events in the future, do we really need another set of limited time things? I think it's just too much. If you're someone who enjoys some of the more lackluster challenges or don't have a difficulty meeting the times, then I hope you enjoy it. But for me, it's really difficult to even play in these, and that just sucks. New music and catalog. They're really good. I love the new lobby music. I really like the new battle music. I know some people don't, but I like it, and the catalog is nice. I really like the console items. They sound like something really cool to put in my locker. The gear in the catalog is also nice. It's too bad it's almost all of the gear we got. Chill Season added 75, Fresh Season added 157, and this season added 25 pieces of gear, 5 of which are returning pieces already in previous games. Every time there's a positive thing, it's hit by something unusually negative that I just have to look at and go, okay, but why is this like this? And you know what? That's the whole season for me. I feel like I'm constantly jumping between extreme positives and extreme negatives. Some stuff like the kit design as a whole and the new Salmon Run stage and music just feels so good and things we've needed for a while, and then I look at the lack of content, mediocre balance patches, poor gear, and event mode being completely fumbled, and it's just such a mixed bag. I think it's better than Chill Season, but I don't think that's really the highest compliment. I was hoping that these would step up, and after Fresh Season, I thought they would. As a player, I'm still really enjoying the update, don't get me wrong. New content is still awesome, and I'm glad the effort is there, but the execution on so many things being so off is something I can't help but feel disappointed with personally. Today, it's time to review Drizzle Season, and that's something I've done for a few seasons before, but to me, this is different. This is a season that represents 1 year into Splatoon 3, and it's also probably the most complicated season to review. It got a lot of backlash when it was initially revealed, and now I kind of want to revisit all of that and discuss what I think about it. I'm gonna go through this by sections and try to break down what I think in a concise manner, but stick around to the conclusion at the end because I have a bit more to say there than usual. Subscribe if you enjoy, and let's get started. Let's get the obvious part out of the way. The weapon kits are probably the weakest part out of this entire season. There's the obvious part in that outside of the brand new weapons, there's only 8 of them, which is the lowest we've ever had, but also there's not really a lot of strong kits to look forward to. The only one of these to see significant competitive discussion is the Sorel umbrella. That's literally it, and it's mostly because there's been so little umbrellas in competitive play that a new kit allowing it to be there fostered a lot of discussion on the main weapon itself. Don't get me wrong, it's an amazing kit, just, you know, it has an advantage in being prominent in discussion. Outside of competitive though, the kit design still manages to be very fun. Blob and Gootuber obviously are the weakest kits of this season, and even then they have a lot of reasons to be enjoyed casually. And this is usually the attribute I will defend when it comes to kit design. However, I think it's important, especially when there's a lower amount of kits, that the standard of them goes higher. If we're getting fewer of them, I want them to be even more fun casually or being even better competitively. And in this case, I don't think either aspect was really done that well there. Sizzle Season barely added any bombs and still manages to add more weapons in terms of being good competitively as well as being fun casually and more kits overall. And that season is also a low bar. I think in every aspect, this is the worst series of kits we've got so far, and honestly, I'm already pretty over the excitement of most of them. The 2 new main weapons, on the other hand, I think are a lot better. Outside of the long arrow spray, I've typically enjoyed all the designs of weapons they've added to the game, whether they've succeeded as competitive weapons or not. Dreadringer feels like the heavy slosher that we never got. Explo was always kind of its own thing, whereas this feels like the natural kind of heavyweight, slower, more powerful option that's more standard to the vanilla bucket. Personally, it's become one of my favorite weapons to play, and I think it has its own share of unique strengths with its high damage output and extra range being very unique with its 2 sloshes. Balance-wise, most players seem to agree it's a bit low, especially given that it also has Reef Slider on it, but it still has some reasons to be used, and I think that's a pretty good spot. I have to give it to the heavy edit though. Out of all the new weapons being added on launch, this one has ended up by far the most powerful. This has been something that teams have been immediately looking to put into their team comps, and not just one of them, quite a few of them in West and JP have been very interested in what this weapon can do. Obviously it has cooler, but that doesn't guarantee a weapon sees use. I mean, just look at Dynamo. It's had a lot of interesting stats, and trying to figure out its role and how it plays is something we're still working on, which in my opinion is the design of a weapon that has a lot of depth to it and a lot of room to grow, which just adds a lot of playtime in my opinion. I would say this is definitely the part of the updates that the devs have done a really good job on keeping consistent, and I personally really like these added options. Next up is something we probably should have seen in the trailer at some point. We got a new Grizzco weapon. The Grizzco dually is really cool. I think its gimmick of having this giant explosion and 9 separate rolls is the kind of crazy fun we expect from those types of weapons. Having it debut on a big run so close to the start of the season is a great way to get more people to use it when testing out the season for the first time. And I think its gimmick and playstyle is entirely unique to it. They've done an amazing job with it. Finally, to wrap up the weapon talk though, let's talk about the balance patch. This was a very small one, and usually I don't like that. And while I definitely still have my gripes with this one and think it could have been better, this is the first time I can excuse a patch being really minimal. During the time this update released, not even the competitive meta had really settled fully. Like, there were some things we knew about, like last ditch effort and tacticooler being really strong, but the exact comps and how you played them is still being figured out. We've seen the rise of a lot of Zuka weapons and mid-range stuff in the last week, week or so, and that's a hard thing for the devs to balance this close. I'd only really say this patch fails at not buffing some of the absolutely terrible options. In stuff like this where it's hard to tell what mid-tier weapons may secretly be way better than they are, the absolute bottom of the barrel of weapons is a good time to visit, especially those that already have a second kit and don't see a lot of use like H3. But really, that's my only complaint, and if the mid-season patch ends up adding a lot more of these buffs, I think it's totally fine. As a whole, when it comes to weapons in the game, the balance is just in such a good spot right now that they don't need to do a whole lot. The amount of work something like a patch or new kits needed to do in crab meta, for example, is a lot more than now, so it gets away with smaller changes. Let's sidetrack to some of the smaller stuff. Gear, music, and titles and banners and stuff. The reason I want to talk about this is, one, we got new music much faster than last time, which is nice, and I think the songs are some of the best in the series. The new gear was pretty good, even if there wasn't a whole lot of it this time, and most importantly, they added a lot, and I mean a lot, of titles and banners to this season. There were a ton of them, and I really do wonder why we got so many this time around, because, I mean, 400 titles is a ridiculous number. For a season that was initially being criticized for a lack of content, it's kind of odd something like 400 of a new thing wouldn't be shown off at all in the original trailer. Regardless, I think it's worth praising here. The only other smaller feature I can note is the changing your gear thing with the shirts and hats. I'm gonna be honest, I don't really use it, but I know for some people customization is very important, and to me, more options are always good. The smaller editions of this season ended up being a bit more impactful than it originally looked like. Again, a lot of extra titles especially carrying this here, and I think it's still worth bringing up. Something else I think this season did well with is Big Run and special events. Big Run happened fast this time, pretty much immediately after the season launched, which I think is really good. Having a big event to be able to try out while all the players are on the game is a good idea, and I also think Big Run was handled really well. Being the debut of a new Grisco weapon is something I've said I wanted in future updates, so it's kinda hard to not praise it here. And on top of that, I think Umami Ruins has been the best Big Run stage. It seems really smart with how the different layouts are handled. They feel very distinct from each other, and it gives the stage a very unique sense of identity. It feels a lot less restrictive to move on than many of the other Big Run stages, which has been the main problem with it so far. So I'd say I have a lot of fun with this. The 1-year anniversary Splatfest hasn't happened yet, but I will say from what we know, it seems like there's some extra effort put into this one, so I'm also gonna give props to that. Again, can't say too much, hasn't happened yet at the time of recording this, but it is cool to see these events happening a bit closer to each other and more frequently. Finally, with Salmon Run, we have a returning stage. There's pretty much no changes to it as per usual, but where that was something I really disliked when it came to, let's be honest, the worst map in Salmon Run, Marooner's Bay, I actually don't mind it here for one simple reason. What the fuck? This map does not feel the same as in Splatoon 2 at all with the egg throw. My big issue with Salmon and Smokeyard is being on the side without the basket felt terrible in Splatoon 2. You basically had to go across or go through the trench, and it just felt unnecessarily awkward. Luring bosses to the basket is important, of course, but whenever there would be a bit of global spawning over there, it would be a problem. In this game, though, egg throw pretty much fixes that problem. The stage flows very differently, and because of that, I like it. Would it be nice if there were a bit more changes? Sure, but I think this is a stage that feels much more different with the mechanics of Salmon Run, and so I think it was an excellent choice to bring back that I've enjoyed a lot more than I initially thought. Alright, let's get to the absolute best thing this season does well. This season needed something to carry it. We only have one more thing to talk about that's super noteworthy. The content's been kinda lackluster, and so the knockout punch of this season to really set it apart, and what has been driving a lot of more positive reception, has been the new maps. It seems like the Splatoon developers have finally moved on from these kind of hallway layouts and have given players more freedom again, and there have been more inkable walls than ever before and plenty of different routes. While there are still some problems with these stages, these feel like evolutions on the previous game. I think Crab Leg feels like a Splatoon 1 map in many ways, and especially on some of the more open layouts like Clam Blitz and Rainmaker, retains a lot of the rotation, open, and varied routes, as well as unique gimmicks like that Great Bridge up there that Splatoon 1 had, while having subtle decisions to make them feel even better than some stages in that game. For example, having a bit more paintable blocks on the grates than Hammerhead Bridge did in Splatoon 1 to make it less alienating to weapons that don't stack a bajillion run speed. Meanwhile, on Shipshape Cargo Co., it feels a lot more like an expansion of the Splatoon 2 layout. You have a lower part, you have a flank with some grates, you have a middle area that actually changes pretty drastically in each mode, and these unique arches to be able to go across. While it still doesn't have anything super defining, and of course isn't as open as something like Crableg Capital or some of the better Splatoon 1 maps, it does feel like an evolution on Splatoon 2's map design. And I think having one stage that feels like it's going for a Splatoon 1 approach and one like a Splatoon 2 approach in the same game is really cool. So yeah, the praise that people have been giving all these maps, it's pretty damn well deserved. They've done a great job, and it just goes to show how amazing so many other parts of Splatoon 3 are when they're not hindered by the map design. I'm a fan. Now, look, for 1 year into the game, this update's still underwhelming. I don't want to come across as justifying the entire update for the things it does well. And I know compared to Sizzle Season where I was fairly harsh, I've been a bit more forgiving in this review. Honestly, despite its shortcomings, I do really appreciate the things this season did well, and I can understand that more than likely, a lot of things are being pushed back given that Side Order hasn't happened yet, whereas for Splatoon 2, Octo Expansion happened a lot faster. So I'll wrap up with this. If Side Order comes out and it's really good, and afterwards the update cycle is able to pick up, especially in regards to kits, I think Splatoon 3 will end up in a fantastic spot. And while this update wasn't the one I imagined it to be, and really I do wish there were more, I am satisfied at least seeing that there's progress in some important areas like the stage design. So I think it's fine. I'll appreciate what this season did well, even if it is flawed compared to previous ones. Hello everyone, it is that time again to do a new season review, and we got a pretty interesting one this time with the Chill Season 2023, another season where we got 2 new specials, some interesting maps, and a lot more to talk about. So I won't waste any more of your time, subscribe if you enjoy, and let's just get right into it with the specials. So I'm going to talk about Triple Splashdown first. This is the second rework we've gotten of Splashdown. Thanks for making my video on the topic irrelevant in like 2 weeks, Nintendo. Really appreciate that. And this time, I think they did a much better job with it. I think the concept of having it so your Splashdown will almost certainly have one explosion hit the floor is a really cool concept. It keeps Splashdown canceling as a really hype and cool play while not making it completely invalidate the special. And because of that, you have to be a bit careful where you're shooting the Splashdown from, where you're going, etc. That and the extra fists, of course, just look very cool. While the special is still on the weaker half in this game, it is substantially better than it was in Splatoon 2, and that's great. My issue with it comes from all the small little nerfs that happened between Splatoon 2 and 3. For example, the splashdown takes about 10 frames longer before it starts hitting the floor. The super jump splashdown radius is way smaller. There was a generous 70 damage hitbox that got removed. The radius isn't larger anymore when you use it on high ground, and of course the special meter drain. Some of these make sense, like maintaining 25% of your special because you die in it was always kind of dumb, and the radius increase from higher ground was kind of a weird mechanic. But other changes like the extra 10 frames in the air, and especially removing the 70 damage hitbox, considering we gave this to Enperry, which has a curling and main weapon which would have comboed off it, feels like overkill. Realistically, if they revert a bunch of the nerfs they did between games, I think it'd end up in the perfect spot balance-wise, and so far I've had a lot of fun with it. Next up, the splatter color screen I think may be the worst designed special they have ever put in the series, which is an insane take given that there's been stuff like Ink Armor and Stingray in the game. And for the record, this isn't because I think its effects are negative on the game. Though I do think that's an issue, it isn't really that big a deal. It adds to some visual clutter and can be very annoying, especially from a spectator POV. But it's not really that unhealthy for the game, and even that has some positive attributes like buffing short range and encouraging a bit more interaction in general. No, the actual reason I have a problem with this special is because I'm basically convinced it had next to no accessibility testing. Now this is a hard topic for me to talk about that I'm not as much an expert in, so I made a post about it on Twitter after seeing a lot of people talking about it, asking what effects people had with the screen for things like light sensitivity. For me, I have a slight amount of sensitivity to bright lights. So depending on the type of stage and the type of ink color combination, screen can go from not really affecting me at all to actually really hurting my eyes. But even for me, it's not as drastic. It's clear from going through the replies that a lot of people have way worse of an experience. Let me put this in simple terms. If the special disproportionately affects people based on an outside disability factor, that is a humongous problem. That should not be a thing in the game. Everyone should be affected by screen screen in the exact same way. Just like Inkstorm doesn't do a bit more damage to someone if they have a hand cramp, this thing shouldn't impair people's vision more because of a disability outside the game. It's a humongous problem and another reason this special needs a dramatic overhaul. Again, I really have no idea how this went through, and I hope that people can be more understanding for those who are suffering with forms of disability, making this special completely unfair to go against. And by the way, competitive-wise, action is already being taken, and discussion is happening in both scenes, contrary to popular belief. Currently, Sendoku Season 2 is starting, which is a system you can play and find out more about here. And in that system, you can actually select if you have sensitivity issues with splatter color screen, and if so, it will be banned in any sets you participate in. This will likely be the solution in a competitive setting until action is taken. So that way screen can be used when it doesn't affect people, but it will not harm anyone with a disability. And as for spectator cam, it seems like it's easy enough to avoid the special, so this shouldn't be a thing bothering viewers. Regardless, I hope this makes it clear that precautions in the competitive scene at least are being taken here. This is a serious deal, and anything affecting people with disabilities will be taken seriously by this scene. It's ridiculous that this even exists, and it knocks a lot of points off the season for me. Anyway, let's talk about the balance patch. In terms of the actual balance changes, it was pretty pathetic. The game's in a solid spot, but there really needed to be some more buffs. The only real theme is mid-range tended to be buffed overall, which does stack with the fact that the two main kits they added this season were also mid-range weapons. What is worth talking about more is the X rank and salmon run changes. X rank adds a lot more variety to the matches you play and makes the rank system a little bit more reasonable at times. While the salmon run changes add 2 new specials to the game, make it easier to start at higher difficulties, and make it so that you are guaranteed to have at least 2 long-range specials in your comp. These are all fantastic small changes that go a long way to improving the mode, especially the salmon run having 2 new specials in it, which is really nice to see, and I hope we get more of them in this mode eventually. In addition, you can use Sheldon licenses on the gacha machine, so that's cool. I would still say as a whole, this is one of the worst balance patches in terms of the balance changes they made, but at least it came with these cool other changes. Let's talk about the weapon kits. I think the quality of these as a whole is still a lot better than most of the seasons in the game, but I'm a little bit disappointed in them at times. For example, again, I really talked about how N. Perry's kit worked in general, but I think it was also a poor splashdown candidate. Not only is this the third dually to have a form of splashdown rework, yes, Reef Slider is a splashdown rework, we see horizontal splashdown in the beta, but on top of that, the N. Perry kit in Splatoon 2 worked by having an entry special since you had a curling bomb which didn't really help you get in. Now you have a special that also doesn't let you get in. And yes, we should have known this was a problem already, because this was exactly why V-Sploosh didn't work in Splatoon 2. So I don't really know why N. Perry got this over something like 52, for example, which would have at least had a better combo out of it and made a lot more sense as they tend to put some of the new specials on a shooter. Or at the very least, it could have had N. Perry with a burst bomb, which would have been a nice throwback to Splattershot's original kit and made a lot more sense. Maybe if they buff Splashdown to have better synergy with it, it could work a little bit better, but considering how iconic N. Perry's original kit is, I can't help but see this as a letdown. At least it's fun though. Besides that though, some of the stronger kits are definitely noteworthy and a lot of fun, like Pencil, S-Blast, Stamper, and Foil Squeezer. So I think as a whole it's still pretty solid. 9 kits isn't a great amount, but considering we got 2 new specials, it is at least more than last season, though that's not a very high bar. We should still be getting way more of them, but I think it's clear at this point all the second kits will be done when the actual seasonal model is done. So hopefully there's an extension for third kits. Briefly, I think the new music is cool. I think the catalog is okay. We're keeping the returning catalog items though, and I think we should really just put them in the shop, but whatever. And challenges actually got to change. They're going to have double the amount of time slots, basically alternating every 2 hours for a total of 12 hours instead of 6. This is a sizable improvement, though I think we could have done better. It's still worth mentioning though, and some of the new challenges this season look really fun, such as the Gushers one, or having the Rainmaker available on some other mode. Please don't be Turf War. Big Run also happened. I still don't feel like talking about the gold changes at all and how that works, so I'm going to ignore that. I think Barnacle and Dime was a very fun and easy stage for the event to happen on, and I really like the new King Salmonid. Both being able to throw bombs in its mouth and shoot its weak point adds a good amount of options to deal with it, and I think it is a lot of fun, as well as just visually very stunning, especially when it actually throws you up in the air to kill you. You go flying super high, and I think that looks amazing. So yeah, as per usual, Big Run stays easily the best event in this game. Finally is the stages. I already broke them down in detail in my stage review, so I won't spend too much time on them, but I think these are the best ones they have added. Both of them are insanely fun stages that can be really well enjoyed with unique gimmicks. And while Bluefin isn't the best stage competitively, Ramen absolutely is. So I think this is a win whether you're casual or competitive here. It seems like the stage design trend we've been seeing over the last season is continuing, and really my only gripe is we didn't get a stage rework. But hopefully we can see one in the mid-season patch. With that all being said though, what do I think of the season as a whole? I think it's okay. The seasons with new specials tend to be some of the better ones, but really the screen has not got me feeling the best about this compared to Kraken and Super Chump, which I felt were a lot better additions. For the standards that I have towards what I think an update every 3 entire months should do, it falls a bit flat. But when comparing it with the other season updates we've gotten, I can't deny this is probably one of the best ones. Doesn't top Fresh Season for me, but it gets close. So yeah, that's my consensus on it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time. Alright, time to record another video for the channel. What are we talking about today? Oh yeah, the season review. I had to put that off because Fizzbangs weren't available until the 22nd when there was the next Splatfest. Look, guys, I try to avoid being too negative about Splatoon on this channel, so I wasn't looking forward to this review, because I have to be honest about it and not sugarcoat things, and, well, this is gonna be mostly negative. So, I do want to preface that it is gonna have to be that kind of video. I'll try my best to point out the positives where I can, because I did set out to review every season fairly, and I'm gonna do that here. So, just giving you a heads up that it's gonna be this kind of video today. You should subscribe if you enjoy, and, let's just get started. First off, the new weapon kits. We got 8 of these, which is already one of the lowest amounts we have gotten for any season, which isn't great. Competitive-wise, the power of these are really low. The only one of these to see some competitive usage is 52 Deco, because you can have a 52 with a bomb. It's not even one of the stronger kits in the game, it's just a kit attached to one of the best weapons in the game. I think the Squiffer kit is the big winner out of all of this. I mean, there's been memes about it. It's just the most fun one by far while being a strong competitive tool. It's a really unique one out of anything we've gotten. I've enjoyed the Glugas, the Leader, and some of the other ones a little bit, but I mean, this definitely does suffer from a lot of the kit design problems that I've covered in another video, so I won't talk too much about it. I guess the best example out of anything I could talk about is Nautilus. It's a Noob Stomper main weapon that got a Noob Stomper special weapon, but then we want to back out and give it 210p because that might be too strong at lower level play. And I'm just thinking, well, why not give it a special that's weaker at lower levels and better at higher levels? Something that makes more sense competitively. Could be cool. I'm not really sure why Splashdown was picked for this weapon, honestly. And it's yet another cool inkjet option that didn't come back, which feels kind of odd considering just how many cool Kraken weapons have come back as reference kits, but look at the amount of inkjet ones by comparison. Both of these are some of the most liked specials from their respective games, but clearly one of them is getting better treatment than the other. Which I'm not saying is a bad thing for Kraken. All of the Kraken kits have been pretty well received, and yeah, CRB should also be a reference kit. I'm just saying, you know, maybe Inkjet could have gotten a few of them as well. Anyway, I don't want to spend too long on kits because, yeah, that's been the topic of a lot of scrutiny. As for the new main weapons, the Brill is still a little disappointing to me, but I think it could be more fun depending on what they do balance-wise. If they make it a little bit more unique or really play into the shield gimmick, I think it could be a lot more than just, hey, they gave old Brella's damage to this weapon with a really weak shield, and I hope that happens. But for the time being, it just makes me miss old Brella. Dowsers are still really fun, one of the most satisfying weapons to play for me, and it's really cool to see a unique playstyle in the Dually class, with a much better kit than most of the new main weapons have gone on their release. So yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of the Dowser still. There's the balance patch. They didn't do any horrible changes, but it's basically a nothing burger. The highlights were the things that weren't even balance changes, which was the Splatoon 1 emote finally getting unique animations for Splatana Stringers, Dualies, and Brellas, something I talked about back in the Fresh Season 2023 review, and the table turf changes, which I think those were cool. We got a few new characters, some more maps, a higher amount of decks you could have. I asked some table turf players for their thoughts on it since I don't play it as much, and the main consensus seemed to be that these are fine, but two of the main features they've been looking for are the ability to select table turf on the menu maps and online multiplayer, which, yeah, it feels really weird that these aren't options, so fair point there. Again, it's still new stuff, and much more for table turf than I think a lot of people expected, so we'll definitely take it, but I really hope those other features Table Turf players are asking for can actually happen. We got a lot of new gear, mostly returning from Splatoon 2, and a Splatoon 2 victory emote for the weapons. It's not all the animations, since obviously they had some unique ones, especially split between Inklings and Octolings, but it seems like they got most of the fan favorites in, which is great, and hey, it is a lot of returning gear, which is nice, even if it's a year and 6 months later. Splatfest got some points changes so that the second place in each category would still get decent points, which I think will improve how the system feels, some new fest music, which is just overall positive, and the main new mechanic of Fizzbang, which I think is fine. You get these as the match progresses, getting more as you get later into the game, and as a reward for kills. With a maximum of 7, you can throw them with no ink tank usage, have decent range, a giant blast radius, and do 30 damage with a very slow detonation time. Basically, these are just mini weaker burst bombs that everyone gets to have and use. They're not super exceptional, but they're fun. It's something new for Turf 4 and Splatfest, which is great. It's something we've needed. I think anyone hoping for it to be really game-changing is going to be really disappointing, but I think they're totally fine as is, and definitely serve to make a bit of weapons more fun. They are very, very funny. Finally is Salmon Run. There is a lag fix in terms of how salmon spawn on the edge of the map that I have actually noticed has helped a lot. Slider got a pretty significant buff, so that's cool as well. And we had a brand new Salmon Run map. This might be my favorite one, honestly. The unique layout in terms of being a flipped map in the mid layout, kind of like the multiplayer stages, and the abundance of ink rails really gives it a unique identity that I found a lot of fun. It is, however, the last Salmon Run map they're adding, which I'm very confused by, because they've basically been porting most of the Splatoon 2 Salmon Run stages to this game with very minimal changes, and we still have 2 of those left. Salmon Run still doesn't even have 10 maps in it. This is the second game to have Salmon Run. It just feels like we definitely could have had a little bit more here. But alright. Big Run also happened on Eeltail Alley. They thankfully used the tricolor layout, which is a little bit more unique, and I mean, I still had fun with it. Big Run is my favorite limited time event, outside of a few of the challenges that pop up. But I mean, it's Eeltail Alley. It's just really hard to make that stage feel super unique and fun. So it was fine, but I definitely enjoyed other maps more. Speaking of limited time events, I don't have much to say for challenges because we haven't played all of them, but Full Steam Ahead happened, and that was really cool. So, you know, just want to point that out. Finally is the new stage, Marlin Airport. I think this one is definitely way better than where we started in Splatoon 3, but I could definitely see more of its issues now that I've played it a bit. Mainly that once you win the team fight in mid, everything condenses into this tiny fan and court area. This gets a little bit better in Rainmaker after the checkpoint and Clam Blitz all the time at least, but it is definitely a little bit sad how much of the fights tend to condense into such a small space when the middle of the map is so open and large. Still though, I think it's a fun map casually and competitively still has a lot of merit. I definitely had a good time on it, and I'm more of a fan of it than most people. I think the idea of bringing back the fans' unique gimmick is also great. It's good to see more stages having their own unique identity. That being said, again, there's no returning map here for the first time, and it's still really confusing, because, for example, we had Humpback with very minimal changes, so why couldn't we have done that with, like, Reef, one of the most favorite stages in Splatoon history? It feels like it would be a no-brainer win here. I don't know, maybe after next season they wanted the total amount of maps to match the private battle screen or something, but I mean, you know, that's not a great reason. It sucks because I think Marlin is overall a pretty solid stage, but not having a second one is really felt. I saw a lot of other people talking about how much Marlin got spammed the first week to the point where people actually got tired of it because there was no second map that was also being played a lot, since the new stages are made more common for the first week. So yeah, is this the worst season? Yes, like, objectively, it pretty much has the least content. It has some highlights, there's some positive stuff, but you can really tell there's less stuff than usual. I think the only comparable season you can say is worse than this is Chill Season 2022, because 2 of the main weapons were so laughably undertuned that even more casual players noticed, as well as adding 2 of the worst maps in the series back, Brine Water and this cursed ship map in Salmon Run. But even then, that update had 10 weapon kits, 3 new main weapons, and 2 new multiplayer maps. So content-wise, it's still a lot higher than what we got now. Is it overhated? Maybe. There is still a lot of fun stuff here, don't get me wrong, and there were some brand new things that I did have a good time with, but I think people who more play Splatoon 3 every now and then and check out the updates to play the game might not see a lot in this one compared to the usual updates, which especially hurts given that this came out with Side Order, which probably did put a few more eyes on the game. So yeah, as of right now, I think it's a little bit disappointing, which sucks. I hope that there's some more content extension for Season 9 and third kits, because honestly, I think this game could just use a little bit more. But for now, that's what we got. Hello everyone! Today, it's finally time to review what might be the last season of Splatoon 3. The Sizzle Season 2024 put a ton of effort in, but today I want to talk about it and see if it really is the best season we've ever gotten. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoy, and let's get into it. So first off, let's talk about the weapon kits. And before we get into the specific kits and new weapons themselves, I want to bring up these graphs. These are the sub and special weapon distributions at the very end of this season. Regardless of if we get more or not, in terms of the first and second kits for every weapon, this is the total distribution. And it's kinda weird. My main issue with this chart is the lower half of stuff. It's really weird that there are some specials in the game that are on only 5 weapons when we're putting specials on 8 weapons. Similarly, it's really weird to get 11 of certain sub-weapons, but only 6 and 7 of a few others. The subs are at least a little bit more understandable when the picks are something like bombs that are just generally going to be safe and consistent picks for most players. But I mean, come on. Even if we are going with that argument, why is Burst Bomb, Fizzy, and Torpedo so low on this list? And in fact, my biggest issue is Fizzy, Torp, and Line Marker. I've talked about this before, but these are the 3 newest subs to the series, and while Fizzy and Torp were in Splatoon 2, they were on notoriously few weapons. So why are they also some of the lowest distributed weapons in the sequel? Really odd that Torp has been in 2 separate Splatoon games and is on a grand total of 10 weapons. So I gotta be honest, the distribution was kind of weird. The kit design this season was really good. It's hard to even complain about anything, honestly. Even some of the weaker kits, like the well strings, are more just about certain specials being undertuned. I think playstyle-wise, they're unique and make sense for the weapon. And in terms of powerful kits, we got plenty of them. Stuff like the Dowsers, Bamboozler, Custom Range Blaster, both the Decapitators, Edit Splatling. There's just a lot of picks here. In fact, I think the only completely whack option in this entire season is Mist on Recyclebrella. That is really the only one I can critique, which feels insane to me. So honestly, I'm a big fan of the kits this season. It's by far better than any other season. In fact, I'd say to compare the kit quality of this season to previous ones, you'd have to merge 2 or 3 other seasons together just to make a comparison. I also think they did a great job with the new main weapons of the Mint Decapitator and Wellstring 5. Obviously, we don't know exactly how good these weapons are right now, but I think in terms of the balance state they're at launch, it is pretty much perfect. Both of them have a lot of potential, unique characteristics, and fun attributes without being too overtuned or undertuned. And that's a really hard thing to do. A lot of people were originally criticizing Mint Decapitator as looking like a brain-dead free top-tier weapon, and well, it isn't that. It's balanced out through qualities like how slow the weapon can be at times with its slashes. I think both of these weapons are going to be relatively easy to balance in the future, were designed very well, and seem to be quite fun. I'm very happy with them. Lemuria Hub was the stage we got, and I mostly talked about this in my stage review, and since my stage reviews have become focused on one stage and not multiple, this section of the review has mostly become kind of redundant. So to give a quick summary, I think the layout is mostly good, it's pretty unique, and I think the moving platforms add to it gimmick-wise, but there are some issues. I think the amount of uninkable walls at the bottom of the map, lackluster top of the stage, and some platform jank in modes like Rainmaker where it can carry the objective further ahead, keep it from being a super good stage. But I think if you're a casual player, it's very enjoyable, and competitive-wise is still a solid stage, particularly in zones and clan blitz. Overall, it's a very unique stage for this game, which is something I think Splatoon 3 needs. For a game that's stereotyped as having a bunch of hallways, having a layout like this is something we kinda needed. Next up is the balance patch, which has a little bit of extra features to it, like not resetting back to S rank if you are top 1000, but for the most part, this is the balance changes and the stage reworks. The stage reworks are the best part about the update. There is a good portion of larger reworks, the stages with smaller changes still feel very impactful, and there is very few maps that got minimal changes, and I think every single stage that got a change was improved. Even the smaller ones like Yiltel Alley feel just a little bit better to play on, and for a game with map design as one of its biggest problems, I think this was something that we absolutely needed to happen. The patch, on the other hand, is okay. I've warmed up to it a little bit since my review. I think I was a little bit harsh on it. What I think is nice is that a lot of the changes they did were kind of nice quality of life-wise. Inkvac and Bubble being able to paint under them is kind of nice. The Reef Slider paint on the rails is actually kind of cool. Like, you can trap some slower weapons if you set it up properly, which feels like it adds to the special. And for the main weapon changes, I just think that bows were long overdue for some buffs, and both of them got some pretty sizable ones. That being said, I think the patch falls flat when it comes to addressing the things at the very top of the leaderboard. Splash Wall was given some nerfs in this patch, and I feel like this should be something where we're trying to target top level play, because Squeezer and 52 are pretty dominant solo weapons, and Squeezer is pretty good in competitive play, both of these being prominent wall weapons, but instead it looks like this is, at my best assumption, trying to help lower levels of play against wall. Maybe they're even more oppressive in low X ranks or below that, I don't know. But regardless, it feels like wall wasn't properly addressed given what the leaderboards looked like last season. So ultimately, I think pretty much nothing was done to the weapons that actually needed to get nerfed. But the buffs they did were fine, just kind of minimal, which is about on par for the patches that launch when we get content at the same time, so it's there. For Salmon Run, we had the Big Run, which featured all the previous Big Run stages, brand new Grisco Roller, and a new boss fight against all 3 King Salmonids. Having multiple stages in rotation for the first time in a Salmon Run felt awesome. It just kept it from getting stale as fast as it is playing a normal rotation, and it was really fun. I hope one day rotations include more than one map for this mode. Grisco Roller is amazing. The vertical flick is slow but powerful, the horizontal is fast, which gets you into the roll, and my god, the roll is silly. You move so fast. The sound design is really amazing for it, and it's very, very powerful. One of my favorite Grisco weapons to get. I am a big fan of it. I hope if content is extended, we get more of them. Finally, the boss fight is my absolute favorite part of Salmon Run. I think it is a lot of challenge without being too overwhelming. There is a lot that goes on screen, but there is still consistent strategy, and I especially like how you can use the bosses against each other, and that you need to do that in order to effectively beat the boss fight. The idea of turning them against each other just adds a lot more strategy to it, and it's a lot of fun. It feels extremely high stakes, and I just had a great time. Very good event and an amazing way to send off big runs if this is the last one. I'll speedrun real quick the new music, gear, and catalog. For the most part, I don't really mind the new music. There is one section in the trailer part of the song that I think is a little bit overwhelming mid-match, but that might just be a me thing. I think for the most part, it's a good addition. The gear they added is fine, and the catalog is fine. Some of the emotes, like the Squid Sisters ones, was really cool to get, and I really like the poster at the very end of it with one character from all of the different seasons. That's a really cool send-off. There's not a whole lot here in any category, but I think it was still pretty nice. So overall, I don't think the season had that much content, but it's of a lot higher quality. The map is really unique, the kits just absolutely go crazy, the new weapons feel super unique, the big run was super enjoyable, Grisco Roller was one of my favorites, and fighting 3 King Salmonids at the same time was just really cool, and that's not even mentioning stuff like the stage reworks. I just think it's a very tight-knit package. I don't really mind updates like this having less stuff when it feels like everything that was put in them had a lot of effort, care, and thought into it, and that's what I think about this season. Is it the absolute best season? I'm not sure. I think it has some competition, like Sizzle Season 2023 is still one of my personal favorites, but I think it's pretty arguable that it's the best season. And if you're looking at it purely from a competitive standpoint, yeah, there's not really any contest here. They did a great job with it. I really hope we have more updates in store for this game, but if this really is the last major season we're gonna get, at least they ended it off with a bang. Hello everyone. Today, I wanted to take a look back at each season of content we got for Splatoon 3 to see which have aged the best for me. This ranking will take into account everything being done in that season, which will include both patches they got, but will not include any base game content, which did a good job. Or patch 9.0 / Grandfest / Grand Big Run, whatever you want to call it, though honorable mention for those, they were pretty good. With that being said, of course, this is just my personal opinion, and it's going to start on the lower end of season, so it'll gradually get more positive as we get to the better ones. But I'm not going to cover absolutely everything that was done with each season. There should be a good summary during the start of each section. Subscribe if you enjoy, and let's get started. Now, the two lowest seasons for me are both pretty close to each other and pretty far away from all of the others. So I'm going to cover both of them before telling you guys the order of them. Our first candidate is Chill Season 2022. Yup, the very first one. This was rough, especially in the stages category. Brine Water was a really weak stage that highlighted the issues of linear map design, and while I personally like Flounder, it's a very polarizing stage, and the removal of the spawn tunnel and right walls being climbable drastically hurt the stage, even for me. Even the Salmon Run map that was added, Marooner's Bay, is one of the most hated maps in Splatoon 2 that returned with basically no changes. No real winners here. The new weapons that launched were also awful. Even Snipe Rider was only decent at the start of the game, a shadow as to what it became nowadays. While Splattershot Nova was slandered by literally everyone on launch. I remember seeing so many videos of people calling this thing trash and roasting the hell out of it. And of course, Big Swig Roller was a bit of a joke. The ideas for these weapons were certainly there, and I found them fun, but the state they were in just kind of sucked. A lot of the new weapons in Splatoon 3 launched in a very underpowered state, but these were definitely the worst offenders. The only thing I can really give credit for is that it added 3 new main weapons instead of 2, so there's that. There is one part about the season that I think did age well though, which is the weapon kits. On the season's launch, most of them might have been pretty weak, with the main highlight being Tenatech replaced by Neo Splash in 3 months. However, most of them had a unique identity, were fun to play, and aged well over time, with some of the highlights being Carbon Deco, Zinc Mini Spiling, and Forge. I think even Bucket Deco worked alright, and Custom Junior had a unique identity, which also comes alongside 10 weapon kits total, better than most other seasons. X-Rank was added this season. I don't know why it wasn't there on launch. This was a feature in Splatoon 2. There was a lot of gear added, though most was also from Splatoon 2. For events, we had our first big run, which was on Wahoo World. I think this is the weakest big run. It is not a good stage for the mode, and there was no new King Salmonid or Grizzco weapon, which most other big runs afterward debuted with. Splatfests were also really rough on launch, since they didn't have a lot of the improvements they got later, especially to Tricolor. Remember, this is when, if you wanted to be the defending team on Tricolor, you had to pick the team that was winning at halftime. Otherwise, you just didn't get to play it. The balance patches were also really lackluster for the first 6 months of the game. They didn't really want to do too much, and the only notable changes were fixing missile spam, yet another thing that probably should have happened before the game came out, and Wiper's horizontal paint buff, which very much defined how that weapon was played. For the most part, the kits are really the only thing I look back on this season, and even those weren't great at their launch. There's a decent amount of content, but the quality wasn't there. Competing with this season for the bottom slot is the fresh season of 2024. Quick disclaimer, this season launched alongside Side Order. That stuff does not count to this ranking, including the plazas. That's paid content. The new main weapons of this season are the Dowser and Recycle, which, next to the season I just talked about, are also some of the most underwhelming for me. Dowser is a solid idea, but the stats of the weapon feel very undertuned, and that's after it got a better kit and an impactful buff. This feels like they were really scared of making another Jet Squelcher after Splatoon 2. Recycle Brella had a similar pattern, taking Splatoon 2's old damage and in exchange giving it a shield weaker than the Undercover Brella. The regen buff they gave it was nice. Tent could shield cycle in Splatoon 2, and Recycle does that for this game, but the shield HP still feels unbelievably pathetic, which makes me think they were afraid of old Splatoon 2 Brella. Basically, I think both these weapons feel like poor imitations of a powerful option from Splatoon 2 that never got to be their own thing because they were too afraid of recreating them. At least that's my theory. The only stage that got added was Marlin, one of the only 2 seasons to only add 1 map, and most comp players aren't a fan of it these days. However, I personally still like it. Yeah, okay, once the map gets into the fan area, it's pretty limited, but the spawn region is good, mid is wide, and the fans are a good gimmick. I think it's way better than most other maps, especially casually. This season has the weakest kits out of all of them. I think Custom Leader was a poor Kraken reference, which hurts when almost all the Kraken weapons added to the game are Kraken references. I've seen like 5 Dread Ds since the season came out, and most of the kits are just kind of forgettable. I think New Squiffer is the highlight casually, and competitively, the biggest winners are Custom Explo and 52 Deco. With Custom Explo needing a splashdown buff to even be decent, and 52 Deco seeing less use than the base kit. I know I've talked a little bit more about comp play with this season, but I think the flaws about the kits and new weapons seem to be because they were more afraid of competitive stuff, which ended up hurting everyone. However, this season does have some strong suits. While mostly returning, there's over 150 pieces of gear being added. The new Salmon Run map is amazing. I really enjoy the rails and mirrored layout. Fizzbanks and new Fest music added a lot to Splatfest, along with a better scoring system. Table Turf added a lot of new maps, even if it didn't add matchmaking or a menu slot like it needed. Emote-wise, the Splatoon 1 and 2 emotes got their unique animations for the weapons that were just copied previously, and while the balance patches didn't do much here either, S-Blast getting a long-range mode that's a bit more forgiving and Triple Splashdown getting its huge buff were both pretty notable. Honestly, the main multiplayer stuff was the lowest part of this season, but everything else was fine to me. So which one do I think is better? After much deliberation, I'm going to say that Fresh Season 2024 was the weakest one. Yeah, a lot of stuff they added in Chill Season 2022 was weaker. However, I think the stronger weapon kits were a much bigger part of that season long-term, and there was just a bit more content added in that one that I think added up over time compared to Fresh Season 2024. Up next is Sizzle Season 2023. This was originally infamous for having no bombs on its weapon kits, so I guess we can talk about those first. I think the main standouts were Rapid Blaster Pro Deco, most notably for being like the only good dart weapon in the game, and Sorella Tenebrella. I don't think any of the kits ended up being that bad, but I will always hate the fact that Tetra got Sprinkler of all things. This is the biggest fumble in terms of subs in the game. I can say the kits for the most part are pretty niche. If you enjoy the specific weapon, there's probably something there, but outside of that, I don't think they're going to get many new players into trying those options out. The new main weapons were fine. S-Blast has a lot of potential, and I personally really love the concept between the mode flexibility and the lack of jump RNG and fast shot velocity for long-range directs, but this feels very specialized to my interest as a player. Paintbrush, on the other hand, is fine. We needed another brush for a while, but for the most part, I feel like I've barely seen this weapon, and I feel like they've barely done anything with it. It didn't help that its ink efficiency on launch was horrible. They basically had to patch a buff for this right away in the next update. It also just doesn't help that the initial kits for these were not great. Barnacle on launch was alright, good for the time, but the lockouts were not fun once people learned it. And while Humpback is a fine returning map, the lack of changes made it feel a lot less special, for it was already a pretty mediocre map in Splatoon 2. I will say this season had my favorite Salmon Run map with Jam and Slam and Junction. It was a really fun stage. Big Run happened on Undertow, which was fun when it wasn't low tide, but I do not know a single person who enjoyed playing on low tide. Challenges were a huge introduction, and if they were done right, this would have skyrocketed this in the season's ranking. However, the horrible lack of time slots just killed the appeal of the feature to the majority of the player base right away. 2v2 and high jumps were the most notable ones, and high jump didn't happen until much later into the season. Just really unfortunate. If anything, this season probably has the most notable things in terms of its patches. Big pencil buff, a lot of good buffs to Bubble, Chump, and Cooler, the horrid ink efficiency of Paintbrush I already mentioned, and Tri-Stringer finally got to have explosions at combo, which probably also affected Wellstring later. It even fixed Jetpack. Really, the only bad one is that we also did this with Zuka, which would end up being a problem for, well, I don't know how long, because we're still kind of dealing with it, I guess. I don't really feel that negative toward this season, but there's also not really a whole lot that stands out to me, again, other than S-Blast, which is very much my personal bias. The season just feels exactly in the middle to me. Next up is Chill Season 2023. Okay, let's get the specials out of the way. I like Triple Splashdown. It has some overlap with Reef Slider, but I don't care. It's fun, it's great visually and practically, and a huge improvement over a fan favorite S2 special. Definitely worth it. On the other hand, the best thing I can say about Screen is that the concept of it was pretty cool. I like the idea of messing with the colors and trying with the smoke screen for this game, but my god, this special is boring to use. It griefs your team more often than not in solo play, which is where the majority of people play the game, and it really only feels okay at the highest level, where it's still not even that good, and none of this is talking about the accessibility issues the special had, which were even worse on launch. This is probably the worst single piece of content they ever put in the game for Splatoon 3, and it also just takes up an entire special slot. I think the weapon kits were really good this season though. The splashdown choices were fine, and stuff like Stamper Nouveau, S-Plus 91, and Red Pencil work really well. Even things like Reflux Deco that were not good when they originally came out ended up aging pretty well due to buffs to the main weapon and special that made this kit feel like it has a lot better synergy than it initially seems. I think the stages were also a big hit this season. I know Bluefin is not an amazing competitive stage, but between new gimmicks added to the map and a mostly faithful layout to Splatoon 1, I think for the average player it's probably enjoyable. And that's not even talking about Robo Ramen, the best Splatoon 3 stage they added. Like, this isn't even a contest. In a game with weaker maps, adding one singular good one is going to be a huge deal. The Big Run map this time was Barnacle and Dime, which is my favorite Big Run stage. I think it feels really nice there on all the different tides, and it also introduced Joe. Really fun fight, feels just right in terms of difficulty. This season also improved the challenge times I just talked about, which was huge, honestly. I got to play a lot more of them because of that. The gear and catalog wasn't a whole lot this season. However, one other small thing about it is that it had the best trailer. This one had so much goddamn style to it, the most since the Kensa collection we've seen in Splatoon 2. This is the only one I can really remember that well, and it's for a good reason. Balance patches were also solid here. There was a lot of midline buffs, which was a good theme for 6.0. Screen got partially fixed at least. Wavebreaker and Inkstorm got their cool changes with new effects, both of which have drastically improved how much I like their specials in this game. Dynamo Roller finally got to have damage comparable to S1 after this long, and all around, most of the changes that happened were pretty solid. This season does have a little bit of low points with splatter color screen, but it honestly has a lot of good stuff in it too. We've reached the top 3, and in 3rd place is Fresh Season 2023. The only season that doesn't have a trailer. Definitely seems like it got scrapped. Instead, we got that poster. This was mainly themed around 2 new special weapons, which is probably gonna be what determines if you like this season or not. Kraken is fun, but very polarizing because, you know, invincibility, and Super Chump, while in my opinion a very well designed special, was also very weak, especially on launch where it dealt like no damage. damage. For me, I think these specials have been handled relatively well over time, and I find them very fun, so I really like this season. Up next would be the alternate kits, in which we actually have the most amount of them here. And there's a decent amount of good ones as well, most notably probably being the Rapid Blaster Deco, Tri-Slosher Nouveau, ZF Charger, and 96 Gal Deco. It also introduced Tenatech 2. Zipcaster Splash, man, it was right there. I don't know what happened. This game has a very odd obsession with fumbling weapons with this special. Umami Ruins is honestly a pretty solid map, even on launch, and while Manta Maria is definitely worse than Splatoon 2, it at least has some better qualities. It's okay at the time. Speaking of stages, they also did the pole update. I think the new gear was better. There's 126 returning and 25 new, which is a lot, and we got the fabled Splatoon 1 emote here, except if you play some of the weapons not in Splatoon 1, you got that one later. Big Run had a new King Salmonid this time, and a better map, which made it significantly better. Ouroboros is my favorite of the three, so this was an easy win for me. I think the mechanics on it is really nice. It was also the very first extra work, which is the only one I really played. I am not that good at Salmon Run, and I did not find these very appealing, but I would definitely have tried them a little bit more if the first round wasn't the easiest thing imaginable, and basically the equivalent of a 2-minute cutscene, which is an issue that never got fixed for some reason. You could finally play table turf against other people. There's still no online matchmaking, and this is late, but it happened. As for the balance patch, there's a lot here. Big Swig Roller got its object damage literally doubled, as well as better vertical flick 1 and 2 shot range. You can't say they didn't try. A bunch of specials got damage to crab buffs. Zap got 180, that's a bit of a low point. Slosher got consistent 50 damage. Zimmy shoots for longer. Dooley got its lag changes. Reflux got its faster straight speed and tighter shots. And a lot of special changes, including cooler range, slider 70 and radius buff, the God Ink jet buffs, stamp buffs, crab nerfs that fixed the special, and removing tower control crack and cheese. Maybe shouldn't have been in the game in the first place. Like, this season definitely had the most notable patch changes out of the entire thing by like a mile. Overall, like I said earlier, it really depends on what you think of the specials, but for me, I like them, so between that and having a lot of and relatively solid kits, there was a ton on the multiplayer side, a fun Salmon Run event, and a lot of other smaller changes that I think were pretty good. Number 2, the 2023 Drizzle season. I can't believe I'm ranking this high. In my initial ranking, this was so much lower until I revisited it a little bit more. And I gotta start with the low point first, which is what I said was the high point last time. On launch, I was really excited for the new stages, and like, they are an improvement from the base game in terms of the flaws they have, but I think Captain Astro's quote on them aged really well.
I think everyone's so used to eating dog shit that flavorless oatmeal is gonna taste incredible by comparison.
These are both still awkward to move on, especially Crab Leg, and very lockout heavy. A lot more potential for reworks, sure, but we never got reworks to those, so they're just okay to me at best, and the reworks to other stages just made some of the older stages past them in terms of design quality, as well as we got other better ones later. So whatever, I kinda wish we got a returning stage instead. The aesthetics were good though, I'll give them that, especially Crab Leg. The new weapons are what gained a lot of points for me. I think this is the second best batch of main weapons they've put in the game. Even on launch, they were decently strong, and both of them have attributes that actually make them feel pretty powerful, which is an area a lot of main weapons lacked in. Dread hits really hard, and the double slashers paint the map like crazy, and Edit's full charge mode is a laser beam of death that also turfs everything. It also helps that both of these got better buffs both to their mains and kits and made them stronger later down the line. The 2 new songs they added are also great. They might be the best music additions out of the entire set of seasons. The weapon kits were okay. Not as bad as I remember. I liked Sloshing Neo, Incline Tri-Stringer, and Sorella Brella, but nothing really felt substantial. Sloshing Machine and Sorella were the big winners of this, but between Machine being heavily nerfed already and Brella just never getting the buffs it needed, the main weapons just weren't really there to make the kits feel that amazing. The catalog was okay. This is where the returning gear started, which I'm okay with the gear coming back, but like, I think they should just be in the shop so people can buy them more easily without grinding the catalog. They missed it for a year. That's a fair enough punishment, I guess. Salmonid Smokeyard was added, which I do like way more in this game, but after playing it for a while with Egg Throw that makes the map work, it still doesn't feel exceptional to me, and sometimes High Tide is a little bit annoying, especially in king fights. If Triumvirate ever happens there, good luck. Big Run happened on Umami Ruins, which is one of my favorite maps next to Barnacle, and it also added the Grisco Dualies. These were very fun. I love the mechanic of the dodge rolls, and debuting them in a Big Run is really cool. The damage on them was pretty pathetic, but it eventually got fixed later. Challenges only highlight this season for me was the modified Rainmaker one, which is the most fun I've had on this mode in the entirety of Splatoon 3. Quality of life stuff also happened, which is okay. The adjust gear feature I like, even if I only really use it for glasses, and it added a ton of splash tags and locker items, like 400 splash tags. That's a lot. Patchwise had a decent bit as well. Whale got quality of life stuff, Zipcaster got a big buff, Cooler got its cooldown nerf, Last Ditch Effort finally got nerfed in what may be the longest running OP anything in Splatoon history. Carbon and Roller got its horizontal buffs back, which are some of my favorite patch changes. Roller's horizontals were so bad in Splatoon 2, and it looks like Splatoon 3 made it its mission to restore Roller horizontal flicks across the board. Hydra got a decent mobility buff, Curling 65% is good, and Whale maybe got a little too much damage, but it sacrificed Missile, and I guess Zuko's slightly less BS. Decent amount of patch stuff here as well, and in general, this season looks a lot more solid now looking back. While the stages didn't age as well to me, the main weapons absolutely did, and there was a lot more in this season than I actually remember, which contributed to its ranking being much higher than my initial impressions of it. However, it is not my favorite season. That goes to the 2024 Sizzle season, and it's not even close. First off, let's talk about the weapon kits. These are the best, by like a mile. The highlights for this are Charcoal, Custom Wellstring, Mint, Bamboo 2, Dowser FF, Custom Range Blaster, Heavy Edit Nouveau. That's not even all of the ones that were solid. That's all of the good ones, and I mean really good ones. Fun, unique, synergistic combos that feel powerful. If we had kits like this throughout the entire game's lifespan, oh my god, it would be amazing. And honestly, getting 2 kits right off the bat for the new main weapons was kind of nice. Obviously, the odds of the kit being better is probably better later down the line, since you get time for the players to test out the weapons and get better opinions on them. However, having 2 kits on launch just made it more likely you'll have something you enjoy. Wellstring definitely benefited from this, considering that its first kit wasn't that great, and if it didn't have its second one, I don't know if it would have caught on as fast. Speaking of those weapons, these are the best new main weapons. They were really powerful, even on launch, and it feels like the devs really wanted to showcase them being good at things. Like, even for more casual players, you can tell by a mile, Wellstring shoots so many bullets, it paints a lot, its object damage goes crazy. Splatana, you got a huge hitbox, this really far dash, and really good damage numbers. These weapons feel insane in a good way, and like, it even extends beyond those weapons. We got Grizzco Roller, and Grizzco Splatana is still my favorite. I love that weapon, but Grizzco Roller is the most fun one they've put in the game by a mile. Running around is really cool. And we're not done with the strengths yet. The stage reworks were huge. Yeah, they don't make any of them amazing by any means, but they turn a lot of weaker stages into average or even slightly good stages. And again, this game's biggest problems are the maps. Umami, Barnacle, and Hammerhead Zone specifically were all big winners to me. The new stage for this was Lemuria Hub. I'm not as big a fan of it as I was before. It's a different feeling stage in a game where they feel very similar. The catalog didn't have a whole lot for me. I found the emotes were okay. This was the best big run for many obvious reasons, but I love Triumvirate. I like that it's genuinely challenging. It feels like a final boss, and having the Grizzco weapons and extra specials for it is really cool. As for the new songs, I like Sea Source, but I've critiqued Splatoon 2 for having some songs that, while fine for the Splatoon world, do not fit well in battles, and Amalgamania is that for me. Really funny in the trailer, but not something I enjoyed as much in-game, especially that one section. You know what I mean. I get it isn't a problem for most people, so it's probably just a me thing, and I've gotten used to it over time, obviously, but it was really off-putting at first. As for the patch notes, there's a decent amount here as well. Bow got some nice paint buffs finally, Reflux got its mid-air charge, which is one of the best changes it could have ever gotten, Slider got its rails, finally adding a little bit of depth to it, Bubble and Vacuum got a lot of quality of life stuff, Grizzco Doolies got their damage buff, and another big Carbon Roller one. Dowser got efficiency to use its burst bombs more, and Recycle got shield cycling. Really cool mechanic, except that the shield breaks always. And even Slider Cheese got nerfed a little bit, though maybe remove it next time. There's definitely some stuff the other seasons did better here, but for me, this is a quality over quantity. There isn't as much here, but almost everything they did this season was an absolute banger, and it just aged really well for me. Well, this ended up being quite a long ranking, but I hope you all have enjoyed my thoughts on ranking every single season of Splatoon 3. As a whole, some definitely seem a lot better in hindsight, others a little bit worse, but for the most part, I think the model could definitely be improved if they want to go with it next time, especially if we can get more kits, please. Thanks so much for watching, I'll see you all next time.